Hello guys, you're welcome to another video. In this video, I wanted to talk about the problem that I've been having over the past few months now, and that is the problem of choosing a programming language. So I've been on this journey where I've been trying to pick a programming language that I could just stick with, and I had a couple of requirements. Okay, first of all, the language has to be a low level programming language because I don't know, I just prefer to write low level code, code that is compiled and doesn't have garbage collectors and stuff like that. Basically, I like to write high performance stuff. So the choice of programming language that I'm gonna have to make sure that the programming language is fast, it's low level, produces like the smallest binaries as possible. Also, installation should not be an issue. Have great documentation, proper tooling, and a bunch of things like that I wanted. So basically, I wanted a language that is complete. uh, but over the past few months, I've been checking and trying to figure out the ideal language for my requirements, and I found that this is a really, really difficult thing to do. So the first language I started with, of course, was C because that was the smallest language. One of my requirements was also that the language is small because I want something that's small and easy to understand. I don't want to. I like to read other people's code. So when I read other people's code, I like to make sure that what I'm reading is the complete story. I don't like languages that hide stuff and basically doesn't have good readability. So that was one of my requirements. I also want something that is small, and C was one of the languages that provided such. So when I learned C, I really liked it, but I quickly encountered a bunch of issues in the language because the C programming language is really extremely low level. Like, it doesn't have much in terms of features. It just basically gives you all the smallest tools you need to get stuff done. But I find that with C, a lot of things is actually missing that we're gonna need in a proper project. Doesn't mean that C cannot do everything, but for me, like, C is just something that is so low level that it's really difficult to write code, and if you're not careful, you're gonna make mistakes. And that's the problem with C. Memory issues, forgetting the free stuff, and basically, it's easy to write code that um, you know leaks memory or has security vulnerabilities. So I wanted a programming language that at least give me something that looks like C, but gives me some tools to handle memory more efficiently and much better, and but works like C and it's a small C. So then I found C++. Okay, C++ went um, you know really terrible. Like, C++, I didn't spend too long before I just moved away from C++ because C++ looks like 10 programming languages in one. So for example, the first C++ I learned was like the vanilla C++, and then I found C++ 11, and that was like another kind of C++, and then I found C++ 14, and I'm like, okay, this is a problem because every time I read C++ code, it's like I'm reading another code for another programming language that I've never seen before. So C++ is extremely inconsistent. The syntax is just terrible. C++ code is not usually readable. That's not to say that C++ is not performant, but one of my important requirements is that C++ code be readable, and it wasn't. So that was a problem. And then I moved away from C++, and I was just I just moved back to Android development, and I was working with Java and Kotlin, just building Android apps until I found Rust. So Rust piqued my interest, and I really wanted to look into it and figure out what Rust was about. And when I looked into Rust, it was really amazing. Okay, Rust is an interesting language, and when I looked into it, it has all the memory things that I was looking for. It's got traits. It's got basically cool stuff and stuff that I needed in a programming language. But there was an issue I found with Rust. And it wasn't something that when I started I thought, you know what, I could live with it, it's not too bad. but the more I used Rust, the more annoying it became for me, and that was the borrow checker. All right, I really don't like the borrow checker, and I know the borrow checker exists for a reason, and but I find that the programming language I want is not the one that limits my expressiveness. I don't want a programming language that limits my ability to express myself. And like I said, Rust is a really, really powerful programming language. Okay, it works on every platform, or at least almost every platform in existence, and it really works great. It's got a package manager, which is Cargo. It's got lots of tools. There's lots of tutorials. It's even got a book. Everything you need in a programming language exists inside of Rust. But the only problem that I had, like I said, was the borrow checker. I couldn't live with the borrow checker because, come on, like every time I wanted to implement some sort of algorithm, understand the algorithm is like one problem in itself, but then implementing the algorithm, I have to understand the borrow checker. Like basically, and another problem I have is one of the problems I also have with C++, and that Rust is very complex. Like Rust is a very complex programming language. Well, the code is still readable compared with C++. Like if I go into a Rust code base, I can basically read the code inside of my Rust project, which is fine. But I also have the issue where I run into problems with macros. I was talking about the borrow checker earlier, where I basically have to fight with the borrow checker every time I wanted to implement something, and I'm gonna have to figure out like another way of implementing an algorithm that I'm currently struggling to implement. Like instead of having just one problem to solve, I now have two. Come on, like I don't want a programming language that tries to tell me how to do stuff. I want to express myself how I want. I just need you to give me tools to properly manage memory and stuff like that. But the borrow checker doesn't give you tools to manage memory. The borrow checker controls how you write your program, which is my problem. I don't want the programming language that controls how I write my program. I want the programming language that lets me write what I want, but just gives me tools to use to, do whatever I want. And so that was one of the problems I had. The second problem was with the macro system built inside of Rust. I think macros are the same as the problems inside of C and C++. Macros make code very, very unreadable. Like for example, I might be looking at some code. Maybe I want to learn something, and then I was reading some Rust code, and then I hit a place where it's implemented with macro. And macro is like a whole new programming language in itself, especially with Rust, where it's not just normal macros they have the macro rules, which are like the normal macros, but they also have procedural macros, which are like a whole new like programming language in itself to learn, which makes Rust very, very complex in my opinion. And so I moved away from Rust when I found out about the Zig programming language. um so the Zig programming language is a nice language. Is pretty new, like relatively new, still 0.9.1 if you're using if you're using like the stable release. But if you go to the download section, you're gonna find that they have this master, which is the one I mostly use. And I say stable, it's not stable. I don't know, I think it's just like a tagged release. Okay, so 0.9.1 is not stable. Master is not stable, extremely not stable, but I use master. And Zig was a programming language that I found to be interesting. Basically, I really love this about Zig. Hidden control flow, no hidden memory allocations, no preprocessor, no macros. And another thing I forgot to say was how Rust enforces a lot of things. Like I said, enforces a lot of things is not just with the borrow checker, about memory. One thing I hate the most about Rust is the fact that it just panics when there is out of memory conditions. I don't like when a programming language makes decisions for a developer. It doesn't make sense for a programming language to decide for a developer on how to behave in a particular situation. I think a programming language should provide tools for the developer to decide on what to do when there is a problem. But with Rust, that problem is just, I don't know. Rust decides like when there is no memory, then, and with Rust, for example, you don't even get to choose like what kind of allocator you want to use. It just uses like a global allocator. And the interesting thing I found with Zig is that all of this problem goes away, where you don't have like the hidden control flow thing exists with macros with Rust. You also have overloaded operators, like you could overload like the add to do something which could allocate memory and you're not gonna know, which is a huge problem that I find. The problem doesn't exist in C if you don't use macros, of course. um, there is also no hidden memory allocations, which is amazing for me because I don't want, if something is allocating memory, I want to know that something is allocating memory. All right, I don't want to read code and I think, okay, this is just an add, this is just a plus, but it's allocating memory and I'm not even aware of it. So no preprocessor, amazing. No macros. This is really cool because I want a programming language that I can just read stuff. And now, when I was reading this, I realized, okay, what if I want to do generics? I mean, generics is an amazing aspect of programming. You know, it lets you reuse code in a lot of ways. And then I found a couple of things that are interesting, which is this comp time thing. Okay, really, really nice. Comp time says you can call a function at compile time. Wow. So, which means calling a function at compile time is amazing for me. Like, it doesn't exist with most programming language. With Rust, you can actually do it with the procedural macros, but trust me, it's not as easy. You have to work with like the abstract syntax trees or token tree or whatever the hell Rust is using for the procedural macros. Like I said, you have to learn a whole new ton of stuff just to work with procedural macros in Rust. And trust me, there is not a lot of documentation talking about procedural macros. But here you can just call a function. So a Zig function, a normal function that is available in Zig, is what you just call to do whatever you want at compile time. Well, for me, this is amazing. Manipulate types as values without runtime overhead. I didn't really understand what this means, but later I found out that with Zig, you can actually just work with types as if they were normal values at comp time, and this is just amazing. I might make videos in the future showing you guys exactly what they're talking about with Zig in this in all of this, but you're gonna learn as we go with that. So comp time emulates the target architecture. This is also amazing. So according to Zig, I haven't actually tested this out yet. He says that comp-time functions that you execute are going to emulate the target architecture. So for example, if you're doing for like ARM 32-bit, it's going to emulate, it's going to execute that code at compile time for the 32-bit ARM architecture, which means that it doesn't like execute it for 64-bit, and then when you compile the code and you want to run it on your ARM, then you're gonna get issues. Those problems don't exist. So I've only ever used comp time for the 64-bit architecture on my laptop because I'm still testing Zig. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so another interesting thing is you can use Zig as C++ compiler. I didn't really care for this. I don't have any use case for this. It also has its own build system, which is amazing. It's always good to know. By the way, Rust also has its own build system called Cargo. It also has a package manager, with crates.io. So that's, Zig doesn't have such a thing, by the way, and this is one of the things I also love about Rust. So also you could add a Zig compilation unit to C++ project, which means you could compile a Zig file to .o and then add it to like yeah. So this is one of the interesting things I found about Zig, in that everything I wanted in a programming language exists inside of Zig. But there was a fundamental problem that I stumbled, or that I had while working with the programming language, and the compiler has tons of bugs. Like, apart from the fact I really love the syntax, I love everything about the language. I love the fact that you could basically use types as normal values without having to worry, and it really produces efficient machine code. There's just a lot to say about the Zig programming language, and I just love it. All right. But the problem, like I said, is the compiler. The Zig compiler has lots of bugs, so many bugs that I don't really know how to put it. Like if you look at the issues inside of here, you're gonna see that it has 2,000 issues for just the Zig. Like there's just a lot. And I posted an issue, I think a couple of, I think was yesterday, and this code didn't compile for some reason. The compiler just crashed. I have no idea why this code doesn't work. Maybe someone could explain to me why this code doesn't work. But that's one of the issue I have with Zig, is that it's not stable yet. This is still, like I said, 0.9.1. It's just it's not 1.0 yet, and they said that the Zig compiler is not production ready, which is the issue. Which is another issue I have. I needed a programming language that is production ready, and that I can use to actually work on production quality software. So looks like, as amazing as Zig is, as useful as Zig could be, it just isn't production ready. I don't know if I can wait. There's a lot of bugs that just I don't know what happens. Um, but also with Zig, uh, tools for working with the language don't really exist. For example, there's the Zig language server, which works to an extent, is kind of amazing in a lot of respect, but it also doesn't work in some contexts. So for example, the Zig language server doesn't work with C import. So Zig allows you to import like C files into your Zig project, and then you can basically use like those header files inside of your project without having to do anything else. But the Zig language server doesn't have code completions and stuff for that. I'm still investigating if I can actually implement it into the language server, but so far I haven't had any luck. So that's the problem with Zig. Like, it's not production ready. The compiler has lots of bugs, and yeah. So I decided to check on other programming languages, and I found this Odin programming language. Um, yeah. So looking at this programming language, honestly, like just looking at the syntax, I didn't really like it. But that's not an issue. When I first saw the Zig programming language syntax, I also didn't like it, but I got used to it. So I thought, okay, maybe I could check out the Odin thing. And I really tried to, just read the code and try to figure out what's going on. But the issue I had with the Odin programming language is that, first of all, um, it doesn't have support for 32-bit. Like the compiler doesn't have support for building to like 32-bit targets. I didn't really explore the language that much, but from my perspective, the things that are provided to me by Zig doesn't isn't readily available in Odin. So for example, all the comp time stuff, I just really loved how Zig works with comp time. Alright, I just love comp time, and I couldn't let it go. And any other programming language that doesn't have comp time, I'm probably never gonna use. So that's an issue, and that's why I couldn't use the Odin. And so I found the D programming language, and I thought, okay, let's take a look at this too. And yeah, I found that this D programming language has um, a garbage collector. Okay, that was interesting. I wasn't really expecting that, but according to, I think, where is it? According to the documentation that I read, you can actually disable like the garbage collection. Yeah, here we go. Um, yes. So according to the programming language, you don't have to work with the garbage collector. But honestly, any programming language that has a garbage collector, I just cannot use it. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with the garbage collector at all. I don't know. It's just my personal preference, and that was what turned me off the programming language. I really like the syntax of D, because it looks kind of similar to C, but yeah, it has garbage collection, and I just don't want to live with that. And with that, I ran out of programming languages to test. I also found a programming language called Nim, but I couldn't even test that because Nim is a programming language that uses tabs or spaces for, like, it doesn't, I can't even, like, it's a Python like programming language. I cannot use a programming language that uses spaces or tabs. I just can't take such programming languages serious. And it looks like Nim also has a garbage collector, which is another problem for me. And so it got me thinking, the only two choices I really have is between Rust and Zig. And honestly, Rust for me looks like a better choice to make because, first of all, the compiler is stable, it has a larger ecosystem, and everything I need is basically here. And if I can work hard enough, I'll basically, all the problems that I have with Rust, I could basically, like, you know, but with Zig, I also have this love for this programming language in that it is small. The things I have to learn isn't even that much. And reading some Zig code, I could basically go into the Zig compiler and read the code without, you know, worrying about, oh, is something else been allocated somewhere, or is this the complete function or something like that. Like when I read a function, I know this is the function. I don't have to worry about whether something does something else that I'm not aware of, and like it is in other programming languages, including Rust. So I finally decided to stick with Zig for now because I know that the compiler is unstable. I also know that I'm probably making a huge I'm probably taking a huge risk sticking with Zig at this point because who knows? I don't know where the project is gonna go, if the project is ever gonna reach 1.0. But I think I should just stick with something. I don't want to keep jumping programming languages around, and I feel like I should solve the programming language problem once and for all. And so I'm sticking with Zig. But then, who knows? Maybe there is another programming language out there that, you know, I could fall in love with, and that does things a little different from Zig. Zig is the only programming language I think does comp time in the way that I really like. Rust has something similar with macros, but I hate macros. I even hate the word macro. So, anyway, thank you guys for watching. If you have suggestions on any other programming language that you think I should take a look at, maybe I could be interested in it, please leave your suggestions in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video.